This is Hunter Muse.
And this is Chris Snipes, and you are listening
to The Melt.
So why don't we officially start? Jerry, why don't you sort of reintroduce us to the topic, and then gradually go into introducing Lynn and what role she plays in all of this stuff, and how your both of your research has corroborated these experiences with these entities.
Okay, my name's Jerry Marzinsky, and I've spoken to you guys before.
Yes,
I've spent virtually 45 years studying the voices that schizophrenics heard. And, for maybe 25 of those years, I didn't believe that they were anything but hallucinations or something subconscious or, something wrong. The further I went into it, the deeper I got into it, I saw that they started running repeatable, specific patterns. And one of the first patterns were they were consistently negative. They didn't wander from that. They were always negative. Now, if it was a hallucination, hallucinations are all over the place. They're positive, they're negative, they're neutral, they're just all over. There's no way to predict them. These voices run specific, repeatable patterns. Now, the psychiatric mafia hasn't done any research on them at all. They have just, like the Egyptian priests of old, they just went, we hereby declare that these voices are hallucinations because we said so.
Yes.
They have nothing to back that, other than that they look like hallucinations if you don't look a little deeper into it. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I've spoken to them. I've spoken to hundreds of schizophrenics who were hearing voices. We found 23 different patterns that they run that are on my website at jerrymarzinsky.com. And if they're running patterns, they're not hallucinations. Matter of fact, it is the voices that drive paranoid schizophrenia. And if you can make those voices disappear by any means whatsoever, all symptoms of paranoid schizophrenia disappear with them. Now, the psychiatric mafia is not interested in anything spiritual. They don't ever mention it. In all the years I've been in undergraduate and graduate school, they never mentioned anything spiritual. And this is a spiritual battle that these people are facing. It's not going to go away with medications. These voices are energetic entities. They're energy. They're like spirits. You can't get rid of an energetic entity with a physical drug. What those drugs do is they just dumb them down like alcohol, where they don't care about the voices as much, or they don't listen to them as much. But very, very seldom do they ever get rid of them. And as long as they're there, they're going to be causing problems. They're also parasites. So if you talk to enough schizophrenics, they'll tell you, after the voices attack, I don't have any energy left. Mm-hmm. Now, when I was working at this large state hospital, I did a kind of a research thing on that and asked scores of schizophrenics, how much energy do you have before the voices come? How much energy do you have afterward? And it was a statistically significant loss of energy on a scale of 1 to 10. So we're dealing here with a phenomena that is not a hallucination, as the psychiatric mafia says. It is a curable malady, but it's a spiritual battle. And as long as they don't realize that, and if they believe what the psychiatric mafia says, that there is no cure, that there's only their toxic medications, they have no hope. They for a paranoid schizophrenic to recover, they have to realize that those voices they're hearing are not them. They don't come from them. They are a separate entity that is trying to take over their mind and forcing their personality out of the way constantly telling them rotten things about themselves. You're no good, you're rotten, you're nasty, you're stupid, you're ugly, nobody likes you, your parents despise you, you have no hope, why don't you just go kill yourself? That's their main message. The reason that it's so negative is that they want to induce the person, the victim, to create negative emotional energy, which is what they feed off of and drain. Okay? Now, they don't want the victim to know that. That's the last thing they want the victim to know. And if you go tell a schizophrenic that these things are parasitic entities, the voices go nuts. If they're gonna go off, they're gonna go off when they're told that they're not who the person is and that they're parasitic entities. They will go crazy. Now, I've had numbers of patients ask the voices themselves, who are you? What are you? And they would tell them, we are you. So they want them to believe that the thoughts they're hearing in their mind are the province or created by the victim himself, that they are the victim himself.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you say they go crazy, Jerry, are you saying that the person goes crazy or the entity goes crazy?
Well, when the entity goes crazy, the person shortly follows afterward.
Okay.
So they will get very agitated. They will get very angry. They'll walk out. They'll say, well, you're full of crap. So when I was working psych crisis in the emergency rooms, they didn't want us working with these patients. They wanted them out of the emergency room. Mm-hmm. They didn't want any treatment going on. They just wanted them out of there. So I had to figure out what could I tell the ones I thought I could trust and the ones that had some idea that the voices weren't them. What would help them the most in the short period of time I could give them this information? And it was one to reinforce that the voices aren't who they are. They don't belong to them. They're coming in from outside of them, and that they're parasites. Now, they didn't want to realize that, and you'd ask them, how much energy do you have before the voices come? How many do you have? How much do you have after? They'll tell you, I don't have hardly any afterward. And you go, well, where do you think that energy went? And they would say, I don't know. So you tell them, well, you've heard the voices thousands and thousands of times over the years you've been hearing them. Every single time they showed up, your energy levels would drop. Where do you think your energy went? And the vast majority, and probably 80%, would say, I don't know. And then you'd ask them, well, if you stuck your hand in a fire 1,000 times and each time you got burned, what's burning you? They had no trouble saying, well, it's a fire. Then when you brought it back and go, okay, you've heard the voices thousands of times, and every time they came, your energy was drained down to nothing. Where do you think your energy went? Most of them would still say, I don't know. So they were being blocked from that knowledge. Some of them would go, the voices took it? Like it was a new idea to them. Mm-hmm. They weren't looking for where their energy went because they were feeling so bad.
Sure.
It's just like, well, I'm sick. This is part of it.
Before we get too deeply away from something that you said that was very powerful, when you were talking about the pharmaceutical element to this, you were mentioning that the pharmaceuticals basically numb the person to the voices. Do they have any influence on the voices themselves?
Yeah, they do. They weaken the voices, and the voices don't like that. So they will tell that psychiatrists are getting beat up at a rate twice that of regular doctors. Their assault rate is phenomenal. I noticed that when I was working at the state hospital. There was always, hey, Dr. So-and-so just got popped, or this guy got popped. And I'm going, well, at the state hospital, they were spending 15, 20 minutes a month with them. What are they saying to these people that are pissing them off to trigger an assault in that short period of time? It just never made sense to me.
So you're saying literally beaten up?
They were literally being physically
Wow.
assaulted. Right?
Wow.
Now, it took me 7 years to figure that one out. It was a girl that she had 3 strikes against her. We were about to discharge her because she wasn't taking her medications. Her mother called me and said, listen, I can't deal with her at home. You can't discharge her. I'll come up and we'll find out why she's not taking her medications. Yeah. And what the patients would tell me when I asked them, why aren't you taking your medications? You've gone crazy over and over and over again. You see what happens if you don't take them. Why aren't you taking them? And their constant, most persistent answer was because of the side effects, which is true. The side effects are absolutely horrible. They're just horrible.
For sure.
So what I did is did a little research thing and said, okay, everyone that went off their medications, I do a little thing. I'd say, what side effects were you feeling from your medications, your psychotic drugs? Not all of them had the same side effects. So I'd write down 5 or 6 side effects they had. And I went to the DSM and went to paranoid schizophrenia and listed all the negative traits of paranoid schizophrenia. Paranoia, seeing monsters, hearing voices, all the awful things. And they'd write down the symptoms they had from the medications, and I'd then give them both lists back, and I'd ask them to check the symptoms they had from the psychosis, right? And then give them both back and said, okay, which one's worse? 100% of the time they said the schizophrenia is worse. All right. So even though they knew the symptoms, the schizophrenia was worse, they were still going off their medications, which didn't make any sense to me. So this girl came in and her mother was there, and both of us are just kind of like begging her. You were doing great. You were making great grades, and she was in cosmetology class. She was about to graduate. She would have made a great cosmetologist if she could stay on her medications, but she went off 3 times, so she was set to be discharged. So we're both begging her, like, why did you go off your meds? You know what happens when you go off your meds. You lose it. You went berserk. You did this for the 3rd time. Now we have to discharge you. And we begged her, like, why did you do that? And she said, you won't believe me. And I said, well, try me. I've heard some really weird stuff since I've been working at this psychiatric hospital. I don't think you're going to tell me anything that's going to throw me off kilter. She said, it's because the voices were telling me that the psychiatrist was poisoning me, and they were pointing to the side effects, the negative side effects of those medications as proof that she was being poisoned by psychiatry. And in fact, they are being poisoned by psychiatry.
Sure.
Exactly.
Those are toxic symptoms due to that drug, and they're awful. So with long-term use of antipsychotic drugs, there is permanent neurological damage, and it doesn't reverse itself. Past a certain point, if they pull them off of it, the brain will recover, the spirit will recover. But if they keep them on it for long periods of time, they started doing autopsies on state hospital patients, and their brains were shrunk like walnuts.
Wow.
Now, when the researchers who did that wrote a paper on it, the psychiatric mafia and big pharma went nuts. They went, oh, it's not our drugs, not our drugs. It's the schizophrenia that's doing that, evil schizophrenia. So they started feeding those drugs to mice and rats and monkeys, and their brains shrunk also. Now, that's not something that I've ever heard a psychiatrist tell a patient. They will tell them, oh, you'll be groggy, you'll have dry mouth, you might have some sexual dysfunction, but they won't tell them about how dangerous these drugs actually are, and the fact that they cure nothing. They're just treating symptoms.
Yeah.
So these entities are energetic. You can't drive out an energetic entity with a physical drug. All they're doing is drugging the brain. They're drugging the body. They're not curing anything. They don't know what the cause of schizophrenia is. They're not looking for it. The NIMH has reduced the funding for research in schizophrenia down to a dribble. And then they manipulated the statistics that made it look like they were spending more on research than they actually are. They don't want a cure. They want to keep selling their toxic drugs. They're making $14.7 billion, billion dollars a year selling these toxic drugs that are destroying people's brains.
Well, and to be fair, when we're talking about an industry like the medical industrial complex, there are a lot of bad actors in that field. but we can all probably agree that we can't maybe paint with a broad brush and say every psychiatrist is corrupted or every single.
There's some good
decent, there's decent people out there who are trying to do decent work. But I think the institutionalization of psychiatry and how it has been manipulated and monetized is what has really created this stream of nefarious
that's part
players.
of it too, because they don't want them spending time with the patients. They want them dishing out the drugs and throwing them out. You're not going to go to a psychiatrist and come out of his office without a prescription for some kind of drug.
Especially in a state institution.
Yeah. Now, that's not to say these drugs aren't important, because believe me, I've seen patients where these guys would be totally out of control.
Sure.
They would be murderers. They'd be hurting people and themselves if they weren't drugged down, especially in the state hospital and for the criminally insane. They have to be drugged down. A lot of the people that I worked with, if they weren't on those meds, I would never be able to reach them. So I'm not saying the meds are useless or don't have an important role, but they shouldn't be used with the common everyday schizophrenic for any length of time.
Yeah. Maybe to just get your foot in the door and then find out maybe what the root cause of their problem is and then worry about healing that. But
that is trauma. Virtually all of these people have trauma. Now, what they're teaching in the universities does not impact that trauma. Everything that I've learned in undergraduate and graduate school and the PhD program, none of that had any effect on the trauma. But there is something that came out recently and designed by a ship captain in Australia called the MACE energy method that is able to go in there and remove that energetic depression and get rid of it. It's gone. It's out of their universe in an hour. I mean, it works better than anything I've ever seen. So there is something out there that treats these people, and even if the voices don't disappear with schizophrenics, if you can get rid of some of that trauma, they get better. There's not as much to set off because these things feed on negative emotional energy, and that's what's frozen in a trauma, that negative emotional energy. And they set it off time after time after time after time. Once it's gotten rid of, it's no longer there. They can't set it off anymore. So the patient gets better even if the voices don't disappear. Okay.
Well, you make a very salient point where you're talking about the institutionalization of psychiatry and how these psychiatrists are given maybe 15 minutes to do an assessment with someone. And if you're not really given an opportunity to really have a deep conversation with someone or assess their medical records and ask the appropriate questions about diet, about personal history, there's so many aspects to this that are being missed because it is just like a conveyor belt of get people in and out so you can get to the next patient.
Yeah, you've got that. Plus you've got the brainwashing of the big pharma with the universities. So Eli Lilly, back in, the 70s when they came out with Prozac, they didn't have any idea why it worked. They go, well, it's a drug and it's a chemical, so these people seem to kind of mellow out with it, so it must be a chemical imbalance of their brain. They just made it up. There was no support for it at all. There was no research for it at all. They just made it up, and then they started publicizing that, and then the universities started teaching it, and it was all a lie. There is no chemical imbalance in mental illness. They proved that over and over and again. They published it, and these people are still teaching it in the universities, and they're still advertising their medications as if it's a chemical imbalance of the brain. Only they change their wording a little bit. They go, "Oh, it is believed that there's a chemical imbalance of the brain."
Yeah, but it's really not even about an allergy. Like maybe someone has a specific allergy to something that they're taking that is having some effect on their mental health.
Well, there's stuff like that, and there's
but if you're
they have to always be medically cleared before we saw them. Before psych saw them in the emergency room, they had to be medically cleared to rule out all that other stuff before we ever saw them. Okay.
Yeah, but are they really doing like an allergy panel on every single person that goes into the hospital? Of course they're not.
Well, they're not going to do that.
Yeah. So there's things that are getting maybe misdiagnosed or mislabeled that then if you have some mental health issue and you've been labeled something, then you are kind of stuck with that label and then you identify with that label. So I think that
it's
plays
very
a
destructive.
real, it
Those
is.
labels are all made up. They're just made up. There's
Totally.
not one objective test to verify even one of those diagnoses. There's almost 300 of them in the DSM now. There's not even one test to verify even one of them. They're all made up by psychiatry. They took segments of human behavior and chopped it up into little pieces and said, okay, this is, depression, this is psychosis, this is, and it looks real official. You open it up and there's numbers and numbering system and it looks like a real work of science, but it's all a lie. They're just labels. There's nothing in that DSM to say what to do about them. Yeah. This behavior, if it manifests this way, we call it this. You put 10 psychiatrists in an office and you give them even an intermediate diagnosis with some complexity, they'll all come up with a different diagnosis. It's completely subjective. And they do the same thing before they dish out medications. It's like, oh, well, I think this will work. And they try that. That doesn't work. They try something else and then something else and then something else. And they increase it and decrease it and up and down until they find one that kind of numbs the guy out the best. But it doesn't cure anything.
No.
So I wanted to bring Lynn on because, like I was saying earlier, Lynn's a nurse. She's been on the front lines like I have in the emergency rooms. Only Lynn has been able to see spirits from the time she was a young woman, and her mother never discouraged her from that. So she knew she had to keep that quiet. and she's got to the point now where she's willing to speak out about it. And what I found particularly fascinating is when she did a internship on a psych ward, she was able to see these things, what they look like. And she drew some pictures of them for all you guys to see. So
Fantastic.
I'm going to turn things over to Lynn, and I'll just be jumping in from time to time.
Yeah, Lynn, if you would tell us a little bit about your background and what led you up to where we're at right now, like how you started seeing these things, how you got into the profession that you're in, and how you eventually crossed paths with Jerry.
Okay, I'm international author Lynn Monet. I've been a nurse for 40 years. 17 of that has been in end-of-life care. I am 61. I'll be 62 in May. And with that being said, I just wanted to mention something to back up also what Jerry's saying. On another level, not just the mental illness part of it, but when elderly people are in that transitional decline where they're starting to see loved ones coming in at their time of death, it's the same thing. The pharmaceuticals are just loaded onto these people. And the funny thing is that there have been multiple patients that I've had during that time that are aware that they're being medicated, but they don't stop seeing their loved ones coming in. So it doesn't take away the supposed hallucination because it's not a hallucination. Mm-hmm. And but it's the same thing, get the pills kind of thing. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that to back him up. And also the mace that he mentioned, he did on me, and it definitely works, people. It's subtle, but it definitely works. And so definitely reach out to Jerry for that if you need that kind of assistance. But how Jerry and I met, as he mentioned, I have had gifts ever since I was a child. I grew up 3 short blocks behind a hospital, connected with, at that time in the 60s, they were called nursing homes. They're now skilled facilities. And it was commonplace for my siblings and I to see dead people walking through the house in patient counts. You know, it was like, there's a toaster, there's a door, there's a dead person. So we weren't afraid of them. And as things move forward, I'm kind of rushing forward. There was a period of time as a single mother that I purchased a house that was so haunted that I never moved in. It was that bad. I mean, people clawed to the point of bleeding, that sort of thing. But being able to connect with people of like mind during that time helped me to even feel more comfortable with my gifts in other areas. Mm-hmm. So being a nurse, as I mentioned, I'm in end-of-life care. I do see people when they cross over and come out of their bodies and some of the beautiful things that occur with that. I've been in the room and overheard some of the people actually talking to the spirits about children that haven't come in and things like that. And turns out that the person was pregnant at the time and didn't know it.
Wow.
So, and also flat out where I had seen something at the same time as a patient, and when she confronted me and she said, "Can you see them too?" And I said, "Yes." And she had the wherewithal to say to me, "Well, don't tell anybody because they'll put you on medication." So she had the wherewithal to know that she was still seeing these things, and there's a whole story behind that as well that's actually very, very beautiful. I've got some very beautiful things to share that way. But I want to go into the
schizophrenics do the same thing. They don't want to tell the psychiatrist that they're hearing voices after they're drugged the first time. They don't want to be drugged further.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And how Jerry and I have connected up is that, as he said, later in life, I went back to further my nursing degree. I also have a degree in biological science. I'm also a licensed certified death doula. I had to go through the psychiatric ward for part of my rotation in my nursing classes, and we were placed in different facilities for a week at a time. And there was this one particular, it was the very first day that we were in there, and there were 8 nurses. We came in with a teacher, and the teacher had gone to get our assignments. And there was this young lady that looked to be about 20 years old that she had short hair. She was a little bit more on the voluptuous side. She had on a tank top with spaghetti straps and shorts. And I'm mentioning this for a reason because her skin was visible. So they're in many places. And she walked up to the group and she pointed at me and she said, "You can help me. I know you can." Well, of course, I'm like, "Oh, please don't let her be talking to me." You know, that day I wanted to be Lynn, the student nurse, and not Lynn, the weirdo. So, the teacher comes by and she says, "Don't make eye contact," which Jerry, I know how strongly he feels about that, but they did.
Yeah,
And
that sets me off because they were giving that same instruction to interns where I was. Don't look at them. Don't, especially the nursing students. Don't make eye contact. Don't talk to them like they're going to jump on you and kill you if you say anything to them.
Exactly.
It's such nonsense. It's such total nonsense.
Well, we actually had to sign papers in the facility that if we got bitten or hit or groped or any type of harm came to us, that we wouldn't hold the facility responsible. So,
and that's why you won't see any researchers on the front lines. They won't come to the front lines. They don't allow them. All this research that's done on schizophrenia and these other are done in the universities with college students and outpatients and stuff. They're not on the front lines. In the whole 40 some years I've been working on the front lines in psychology and psychiatry, I've never saw a researcher on the front lines. They won't let them in. They say it's too dangerous. We can't take the risk. You're going to get hurt, and we have to assign staff to be around you all the time. It's all nonsense.
Yeah.
Yep. So going into this with the young lady, I was then placed back into the area with another nurse. So now there were 2 of us, and we were sitting at it had these picnic tables that were bolted to the floor. And my fellow nurse and I, we were sitting there, and the young woman walks over and she sits down with us and she starts to tell us how, she had been molested by her pastor at 10 years old, and then her mother got remarried, and her stepfather started raping her, and then she ran away from home at 16 and started to do devil worship that was, didn't work out for her well either. And now she's hearing 25 different voices. And as she's sitting next to me, this young woman is absolutely covered in claw marks. She's got marks on her that look like cat scratches. And just so that you know, the reason why I'm able to identify these is because the house that I originally purchased that I never moved into, a friend of mine got clawed to the point of bleeding on her back and stomach while she stood next to me in that kitchen. And these claw marks were identical to what those looked like. And the thing was too, she had them coming out of her ear, out of her nose, and in areas on her back that she would have had to have been a contortionist to have done them to herself. And she was even saying that one had a large fingernail that was even clawing her on the inside of her female parts, and the facility was claiming that they were self-inflicted. And I'm looking at her and I'm like, there is no way this girl's got demonic claw marks all over her. And my heart's breaking for her. And all of a sudden,
that too.
Yeah. And all of a sudden, they called her away. They have these blocks where they'll have different counseling group sessions or time with their social worker, or time with their priest or family or doctor or whatever. And she was called away for one of those. And when she got up to walk away from us, she got about 10 to 12 feet away, and I'm looking at her, and on her back, they looked like clustered grapes on both sides, like over each shoulder, clustered grapes about the size of potatoes. And they were kind of misshapen, and some of the faces were inverted. So the eyes were on the bottom, the mouth were on the top. Excuse my tacky little picture, but it kind of looked like this. This is what it looked like on the back of her.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh my God, she really is hearing 25 different voices. She's got attachments on her. And of course, with all of the trauma that she had been through, that left the what I call cracks in the windshield of her auric field to allow those things, those disembodied souls to connect. So I'm like, she really is, no joke. They're talking in her ear. So she left. And when she came back, I noticed, and I went to her room and I knocked on her door frame, and because her door was open, and she invited me in. And I said to her, I said, look, what I'm about ready to tell you, if you tell anybody, they're going to think that you're crazier and keep you in here longer. But I believe that you are, in fact, hearing 25 different voices because you have attachments on your back. And the thing that resonates with me that Jerry said is about that their demeanor changes, they get irritated when they're confronted that way, kind of thing. And her face kind of just got all disgruntled, and she turned quickly to kind of walk away from me. And in that moment, the way that they were attached at the top of her shoulder, going around the back and tucking up underneath her armpit, but not all the way around. And it kind of looked like a twisted grapevine, but more like hollow, like a horn, that tannish brown color. And they were anchored in. So they were raised up a little bit on her shoulders. So normally I would not have done this, because at that time I was under stress being in school. I had some personal things going on, and there's a preparation that you do before you go and take these things off of people so that those things don't come home with you.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but I just, in that moment, I couldn't help myself. I just energetically put my fingers underneath, lifted and pulled, and they all started to fall to the ground. I started stomping as many into the ground as I could, and some rolled away over towards her bed. And she turned around, and her face had softened. And she said to me, it felt like you were pulling grass off of my back. I didn't tell her I was doing it. She felt me doing it. So I told her, I said, look, this is a temporary fix. I said, when you get out of here, you need to go and find someone. I said, some of those things have rolled over near your bed. I said, they can reattach to you. I'm sure they're in your home when you go home. You need to find someone that can help you with this, to get these things off of you, and to find, and be protected. And then I didn't see her again. So I take that back. About a year later, maybe a little bit more than a year later, I am in Walmart. I'm crouching down looking.
Let me interject here before you move on. Is both of us were taking risks by telling the patients what really went on. Now, had she turned around and went to a psychiatrist and told the psychiatrist what you told her, you would have been in hot water like I was a couple of times.
Yep.
They don't want to even hear of this. They don't want to hear anything about it.
Yep.
They don't believe it, and they don't want to hear about it.
That's absolutely true. And that's why Jerry and I had to get to the age where we don't give a poop whether they pull our license or not. So now, we had to stay quiet all of these years, and now we're all coming forward because we don't give a flip. So we want the truth to come out so that people can really be helped with this. So I'm in Walmart. I'm crouching down. These two young girls are at the end of the aisle, and they're whispering, and they're looking at me, and I'm like checking my shoe for toilet paper or my zipper, So, I'm like, type thing. And I hear one saying to the other, I know that that's her. And I'm like, oh, well, maybe it's a fan, somebody that read one of my books and recognizes me off of, whatever I've been doing. And she walks over. And when I saw her in the facility before, the parasitic, I call them parasites, these attachments that were on her were sucking the life out of her. So her skin was actually ashen and pasty looking type thing. And here she is, and she's pink, and she's got this cute little blonde bob, and she's lost weight, and she's got her makeup on, and she looks at me, and she looked familiar, but I couldn't place her because she looked so different, and her energy was different. And I said to her, she says, "Do you remember me?" And I'm like, "You look familiar." And she says, "You're the nurse. You're the nurse that helped me." And I'm like, "No way." I'm like, "Wow." I'm like, look at you. And she was actually in school becoming a dental hygienist. So she told me that she went and got help with what I had told her to do afterwards, and that now she was only on a low dose of anti-anxiety medication as needed. She was off all of her schizophrenic meds, and she didn't have any further problems. So her life went forward. Also, being in that situation, going around with other nurses, we went into another section that was very, very sad, because it was an area that was like
Before you go on, let me jump in again. So what I want you to pay attention to is these people can recover. If they realize what's going on, they can recover. It's not a life sentence like psychiatry is telling these people. Sure. I've heard them over and over again say, "Oh, well, the only thing you can do is take these meds and come see us." It's a life sentence. There's nothing else you can do about it. That's bull crap.
It is. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so we were in a different section now. Going through the section, it was kind of a common area where a bunch of people were, patients were walking through, mingling around, watching TV and sitting at tables. And there was this one lady that was sitting at a round table, and she was by herself, and there were 3 other chairs there that were empty. And she's sitting there, and she's talking like there are people sitting with her. Perfect hostess. Would you like some coffee? Would you like some cream in your coffee? Would you like a cookie with that type thing? And the nurse said to the group of nurses that were there actually, I think, 4 of us in there at that time, "Oh, that's so-and-so, and she's talking to people that aren't there." But I could clearly see that there were, in fact, spirits sitting in those seats with her that she was talking to. So she wasn't schizophrenic. She was gifted. You know what I'm saying? She had the ability of second sight. But of course, I couldn't speak up and say that because they would have admitted me, and I wouldn't have gotten out of there either. So again, that's one of those things where Jerry and I had to wait till we got to the age of retirement. So do whatever you want to me. I don't care. So, but with that being said, walking around the facility, I started to notice that there was a difference between people's attachments with the schizophrenia. Hers were the worst. She had the most of them. Sometimes they'd have a little cluster on one side or whatever. But I started going up to my fellow student nurses, and I'd say, "Hey, by chance, does your patient have schizophrenia?" And they're like, yeah, how did you know? And I'm like, "Oh, I just wondered." But there were these other things on people with addiction that I call archons, and they were either crab spiders or reptilian looking things that would fit on their backs like backpacks. They would anchor at the shoulders, and their feet would anchor at the hip area. And the thing that was very, very distinct about them is that their heads were much smaller than the body, and they had a fin that started at the top of the head and went back to the nape like a shark fin, but it was soft and floppy. And there's a reason why I know this too. So I actually have a drawing of one of the reptilian ones. The reptilian ones sometimes would have a tail that would curl to the side, or a human buttocks. And please, again, excuse my drawing. This was actually my brother's. He had one. He had issues with drug addiction. And this is what would precede him in my house. Before he would even show up, we would know that he was coming, because that thing would show up in my house and would jump on the ceiling. My brother had overcome his addiction, but the difference between schizophrenia and the addiction attachments is that the schizophrenic, these things are like parasitic. They wait for an opportunity. So when a person has had trauma or post-traumatic stress or something, this leaves breaks in their auric field that leave areas open for things like the disembodied souls to attach or other things to attach. Whereas with the addictive type attachments, they are invited with the initiation of the addiction. So one is not on purpose, and the other one is kind of invited, and that is the difference. When a person overcomes their addiction, the archon will detach itself. However, it never leaves their side until their last breath. And the reason why is because they've had a good thing going. You know, the negativity of the, even circling out throughout the family and neighborhood for that matter, if somebody gets drunk and runs into a neighbor's mailbox or tree, the job loss, the divorce, the abusive nature, the infidelity, always scrambling for money or stealing things that kind of go sometimes with some of the addictions, create this rippling effect of negativity that these types of attachments feed on, like chocolate. It's their candy. It's called lush, and it radiates off. So they're constantly trying to create the turmoil in the family, and it's easy to do through somebody with an addiction. So they've got a good thing going. They're on a feeding frenzy, and it enables them to do more physical acts.
Well, the schizophrenic ones do the same thing. And they don't just hit schizophrenics and drug addicts. They hit us all.
Oh, yes, they do.
You could be walking down the sidewalk, and all of a sudden I had a guy who wrote me, he said, I heard you say that they hit us all and that they inject these negative thoughts. He said, I was walking behind my boss last week, and this voice jumped into my head and said, spit on it. So they hit us all. It's not just the schizophrenics or the drug addicts. They're getting us all. They're feeding off us all.
Okay.
So, Lynn,
I'm sorry.
I
just saw your message, so I'll do that. I'll do it.
Yeah, no big deal.
Okay, sorry.
No. So you continue with what you're saying, and then I'll ask my question.
Oh, okay. Well, I was kind of finished with that part of it. So
you called the ones that attach themselves to people who are addicted archons. What differentiates those from the other ones, the first ones that you mentioned that were in clumps?
The ones that are in clumps are usually disembodied souls that kind of collect on people for various reasons. They kind of ride along on them sometimes for protective purposes, because usually when they're left roaming in the dimensions, I see interdimensionally as well. So I do see dead people. So anyway, it kind of is a protective measure to hang on to them, just to kind of vicariously live life still through them in some way, some normality to it. Whereas the archons, they're more predatory, and they kind of are waiting. And that's why, if you go they love teenagers for some reason. There's always darker soul.
Drama.
Definitely, drama and trauma, whatever. But like if you were to go to a teenager's party or a young adult's like college party, you wouldn't believe all of these things that are lingering in the rooms to attach. And sometimes they're left behind by, say, a grandfather that has passed away, and they're looking for another family member to latch onto, or another person to latch onto. So they never leave. They're constant. It's why it's so hard for people with addiction to overcome the addiction, because those archons are constantly there trying to taunt them to slip up, because they want to reattach. They don't want to be floating out there, away from them. They want to engage. That's what they do. And they want to create turmoil and mess with people's lives in a really crappy way.
It seems like a lot of drug use or heavy drug use would be perfect for that sort of situation, that sort of parasitism. Like me, I had 10 years of my life, which I call it my 10-year binge, where I was really heavily drinking, lots of blackouts. And I feel like something may have, or maybe some things may have attached onto me during that time, because, it's kind of like an open buffet table. If you've got this passed out person, or this person that's so intoxicated, they don't have no idea what they're doing. It seems like an open invitation for anything to come in and just do whatever
it is
the hell
an open invitation, and what normally comes in are dead alcoholics who can't drink in their spiritual form. They can't get drunk in their spiritual form. So they have to jump into somebody who's loose enough for them to get in, and then they demand that the person drink. So
that's fucking
when
heavy.
They say one drink is too many, it's that's them demanding that person drink and create the cravings. So it's not just the person who's drinking. It's all these other spirits who jump in. And I've talked to people who actually watch them enter drunk people in bars.
Wow.
Well,
okay, so sorry to interrupt you, Lynn, but I do have a question for you. Are there different types of archons based on the drug or alcohol? Are they all the same?
I don't know. I know that there are several different types, and I will say this too. I mean, people can see what I see when you walk into a bar, all of the dead people standing around trying to sniff the drink, and they can't smell it. They still do have senses. It's a memory recall. But I'm not sure. But I know that the crabs are the hardest ones to get off, and I'm starting to try to notice with the addiction if it's crack versus alcohol. Do more of the alcoholics have the reptilian thing and more of the crack addicts have the crab, or if it's just the luck of the draw? Unfortunately, most people have the reptilian thing and the spiders and this new roly bug looking thing that's large, that's kind of diagonal on their back that creates pain. That's another thing. These things can create pain. Some of these attachments. And when they attach to a person that doesn't normally have a drug problem, it can create a drug problem by the person seeking relief for their pain, that Tylenol and Advil and even the tests that the doctors are doing, usually it's on the back because, doctors can't, determine sometimes clearly what's causing the pain, and they can't deny whether it's there or not. So they'll treat the person for it. So, there's that sort of thing too, where it does cause pain. I had, a situation with my daughter when she was 12 where we were still kind of trying to get away from that haunted house, and she had been complaining of pain in her shoulder and upper back, and I thought, well, she's 12 years old, she's not going to be drug seeking, so sure. And then being a single mother, I had Advil and Tylenol in the house, and that's all that I had. And there was one day in particular, it was a Sunday, that she was complaining so bad of pain even after I had given her Tylenol and ibuprofen combined, which, you can do that. And, that I kept her home, and I called into work because I thought, I'm going to have to take her to the emergency room. What if it's a tumor or a clot or something? And I don't want to be negligent as a parent. But then she ended up falling asleep, and I thought, oh, okay, well, she must have been comfortable enough to fall asleep. You don't wake up kids when they're sleeping. So I thought, well, maybe if she can make it through the night, I can call her doctor in the morning and I can take her. And the doctor wasn't able to see her until that Tuesday. That particular Tuesday, I was also meeting two people at that house to come to see about if they could clear the house of the two demons and the young man that had hung himself in the house. So on the way to the doctor, we stopped at the house, and these two people pulled up and they got out of the car. And after talking about some things, my daughter was sitting in front of the house on this little brick area. And the lady said to me, she said, "Is your daughter complaining of back and shoulder pain?" Even specifically on the side that it was on. And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm thinking, I didn't even mention that. Why would I even mention something like that anyway? And she said, well, she's got an attachment. And I said, well, yeah, she's been having a lot of pain. And the lady says, well, I'm not surprised because it's a big one too. And energetically, the lady did something and she popped it off. She started to stomp it into the ground. And the man that was with her also started to stomp it into the ground. And she asked me, she said, ask your daughter how her shoulder feels, how her back and shoulder feels. My daughter's starting to do this with her shoulder. Then she's doing a propeller with her shoulder. And she's like, well, it's not hurting anymore. So it was an attachment that she had picked up in that house. So they can do that as well. And again, it creates an addiction that wouldn't have normally have been there for the person if they weren't seeking relief. So
what about the spiders? What are the differences of the spiders compared to the reptilian, compared to the roly-poly?
The thing that's unique about all of them is they all have that small head with the fin in comparison to the body. The spider is more round. It has the 8 legs, but 2 attach at the shoulders and 2 attach at the hips. I've had people that have had the spider that maybe they have temporarily stopped drinking and it kind of detaches away a little bit at a time, depending on how long the person is off the stuff until it finally gets on their ceiling. But they've talked about seeing the thready legs in their peripheral vision, like even when they're laying down at night and sleeping. And they're like, oh, well, there's this thing that comes to visit me with these these long thready legs that I see in my peripheral vision. And I think it's my guardian angel. So I'm nice to it. And I'm thinking to myself, no, don't encourage it. It's not your guardian angel. Trust me.
Don't feed the animal.
Yeah, don't feed the animals. So, that is how, I mean, they can actually see when the legs, and they assume that it is something else other than that. The crab, when it's on, it's latched on. Sometimes you can see, I mean, it's got like these little tiny claws, not like a big one and a little one. So it looks more like a female crab. But again, the legs attached to at the shoulders, and then the ones they attach at the bottom as well. But then they have also this component of like the claws that kind of they kind of grab in the middle. So they have 6 areas that they're attaching versus 4, like with the reptilian and with the spider.
Mm-hmm.
So
and then how do they react when they know that you can see them?
They try to flatten and hide, and this is interesting because they align their heads with the person's head, and of course, being a smaller head, they kind of hide directly behind the neck very well, and they line up, and they'll try to make themselves as flat as they can, because usually if I'm looking at somebody on a camera, I'll ask them to turn, and do a profile view so that I can see, it's on their back, and you'll see this thing this big, but they can only do it for a very short time. And then they start you start to see them filling out on their back and coming out in a way. And then you see their flap thing too. And they can't resist, because after when I'm talking to people, all of a sudden they'll have their head aligned, but then you'll start to see them peeking around the corner. So you'll start to see something bulging out over here. And it's like, I see you. And then they'll line back up with the head like, no, you didn't, type thing. So, but they also know that I can't take them off the person. The person got them on there. The person has to do the work to get them off. Mm-hmm. So, but then I can help them with things to maintain it and keep it off, as long as the person puts the work in as well. So, it's a little bit different with schizophrenia because, they didn't ask for it. So.
Well, they have to do the work also.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
The exorcists, they might get rid of them for a short while, but if the person doesn't do the work to change the way they think, they're going to come back.
So the greatest offense would be training your mind to not entertain specific thoughts or go down.
Yeah, they have to monitor their thoughts. Sherry, my co-author in the book we wrote, she said every negative thought that comes into your mind belongs to the dark side.
Mm. Wow. So, Lynn, I wanted to ask you about the physical manifestations of these entities. You mentioned this home and scratches on the back, and you seeing similar things with patients. Are there other types of physical manifestations? Like with the spider, does the spider bite? Do you get spider bites on your body? Or with the other entities, do any of them also leave some kind of a physical manifestation?
With the archons, no. With the attachments from schizophrenia, yes. They can leave claw marks, they can leave bruises, they can leave bite marks. Okay, so they can do that. And a lot of times it's because along with the attachments, with the disembodied souls, there's always something a little bit more malevolent, kind of controlling them also, which is where some of the more negative comments and things come in as well too. So, so I hope that kind of answered what your question.
Yeah,
yes.
There's another level, and these lower ones have to give a great amount of the energy that they steal from their victim. They have to pass it up to their bosses or their controllers. So they're basically slaves for these higher, more malevolent entities.
That is so true.
And I've had them where I got rid of some of the lower ones, and then the big one would show up, and I go, "Where'd he come from?" And the patient said, "Well, that's their boss," and he wasn't going anywhere. He was pissed off. So there's levels to them.
There are levels, absolutely, and as there is a dark side, as a darker side to the spirit world, there's also the lighter side, which I made mention with people passing and crossing over and also being overly medicated. I love to share the story, Jerry, if you don't mind, about Edna, the blind lady.
No.
Because this really brings it home. I had a patient that was totally blind. She had been blind for 10 years. And she had only been on my unit for a short time, so I didn't know her that well. But her son and daughter came up to the nurse's station and said, "Mom's talking to people in the room that aren't there." Well, she was actively transitioning, so I expected this, to be happening. And so I said, well, let me walk down with you to see if your mama, needs anything to make her more comfortable or to be repositioned or anything. So I was walking down more to comfort them than to comfort her because I knew she was okay. So when we walk into the room, Edna's sitting at a slant and she's reaching up into the sky and she's smiling as if she's receiving something very precious and very delicate. She's very pleased with what she's being given. And I said to her, "Edna," I said, "who's here?" And she says, "George." And her daughter turned as white as a sheet and had to sit down. And she said, "Well, George is my father." She said, "And my father passed away, X amount of years ago." And then Edna pipes up and she says, "And he's glad that you're taking good care of Pixie." Pixie was Edna's poodle that the son had to take possession of when George died because Edna, being blind, could not care for the dog herself.
Mm-hmm.
So, but Pixie was still an elderly dog, but still very much alive. And the son told me the story about that. And he said, "Do you think my mom's hallucinating?" And I said, I can't professionally, I'm there in a professional, I'm a nurse. I can't come out and say, "No, I don't think your mom, I think, is hallucinating. I think your dad is here." So I had to, I turned it around and I said, "Well, do you think that she's hallucinating?" And he says, "Well, I don't know." And I said, "Well, do you mind if I try something?" I said, "I'm not trying to change your faith or your religious beliefs about things, but in my experience, loved ones do start to come forward to help their loved ones transition over at the time of their last breath." And so I asked Edna, I said, "Edna, can I ask George a question?" And she nodded her head yes. And I said, "What color is your son's shirt?" And she said, "Yellow." He was wearing a yellow short sleeve Ralph Lauren polo shirt, and Edna was so blind that she couldn't even see shadows or anything. So George told her what color the shirt was, and she was correct. How can a blind person hallucinate? They can't.
I'd like to follow that up with there is a good side too. There are guardian angels. We're talking about the bad side because the churches won't do it. I mean, these things are rampant right now, and the churches won't touch it. We'll talk about Jesus Christ and
They're
God.
afraid.
Jesus Christ and God aren't causing the problems. No. Right? So working in the ER, I would deal with suicidal people all the time. And a number of them should not have made it. There's no way they should have survived. And the one that sticks out the most is one lady. Her husband left her. She was about to get thrown out of her apartment. She'd lost her job. Everything was going wrong. She had a teenage kid that was giving her trouble. And she just goes, "I'm done." She couldn't bring herself to actually do something to herself. So she decided she was going to go out to a train track in a little town south of here and wait for the train to come by and then drive her car in front of the train. So she's sitting at this cross gate that was closed. She's talking to her sister in San Diego, telling her goodbye, and then the train comes. So she drove around the roadblock, stopped the car in the middle of the track. The train blew its horn and then smashed into her car, just smashed it, threw it into another track, and another train came by and hit it again. She'd been hit by two trains. The second one threw it like 25, 50 yards off the road, and it was so crumpled, there was no way she could get out of it. It was like a crushed tin can. So they had to get the jaws of life to cut her out of that thing. And here she was sitting in the ER in front of me, and the only injury she had was a black eye. That's it.
Wow.
And I'm like, I couldn't believe it myself. So I'm asking her, I said, what were you thinking when you came to? She said, "I was furious." She said, "I did not want to be alive. I don't want to be here. I didn't want to be here." And she said, "I was just mad as a hornet." She said then she heard this voice come in and talk to her and say, everything's going to be okay. And when that was said, she just got very peaceful. It was just very calm, very peaceful. And she knew everything was going to be okay. So here she is sitting in front of me in the ER 2 hours after she, destroyed her car and tried to kill herself.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not thinking she's suicidal anymore. I mean, she'd learned her lesson. There wasn't anything there. Nothing I was looking for. And I went, wow, the psychiatrist is never going to let her out after this. So I put in my report and I said, I don't think she's suicidal anymore. And I didn't think they'd let her out, and they did. So there were time after time after time working in the ER where something interfered that they should have been dead. One guy had a .357 Magnum with all cylinders loaded, put it to his head, click, put it at the floor, bang, put it to his head, click, put it at the floor, bang, and then he goes, I got it. I mean, what's the chances of that happening?
Man.
It was stuff like that time after time after time after time. So there are good forces out there that are watching out for us.
Sure.
And with the guardian angels, you have to give them permission, because they will not barge in like these negative things we're talking about. They have to have permission to help you. You have to pray to them and say, please help me. Otherwise, they got to stand on the sidelines and watch all this crap happen. They can't help. Unless the person's on the verge of death, like a lot of these people in the ER were. I didn't mean to cut you off there, Lynn. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. And it's not giving me an option to silence my mic when you're talking. I apologize. So I'm trying to hold it so that there's no background noise. My dog just came and was drinking water, and I'm like,
okay.
oh no. I'm like, please.
No problem.
So I apologize. But Jerry's right. Yes, you do. They love to help, but you have to ask them to help you because of your freedom of choice. So they wait on the sideline and let you learn your lessons. So ask all the time. So anyway, but yep.
Jerry,
I'm good. Go ahead. I pretty much finished what I was going to say there.
Jerry, you I believe it was you that said something earlier about them appealing to a higher authority, these entities. There are a lot of, you hear stories of MK Ultra and lots of voice to skull technology and lots of different ways that the government or the shadow government, whatever organization you want to put in that slot, has ways of manipulating people and making them think that they're experiencing certain things. Do you think that there's any overlap with what you're talking about, what both of you are talking about?
Well, I wouldn't think that those things would be parasitic, the voice to skull thing.
Yeah, sure.
They don't have a way to pull that energy out of that person. Also, the schizophrenic voices, if you go to my website, there's a list of 23 patterns that they run. Okay, the voice to skull wouldn't be the same unless these guys got hold of those patterns and mimicked them with the people that they were tormenting. And that's one reservation I had about putting out these patterns, is that if these evil suckers got hold of them, they could actually mimic real schizophrenia by mimicking those same patterns.
Yeah, I'm wondering too. I mean, if something like that could be done on a wide scale with this technology, I mean, that could explain a lot of the craziness that's been going on, especially in the last 3 or 4 years. But yeah, I don't know. Or they're working in concert somehow. Who knows? But you both are pretty firmly established in thinking that they're of a supernatural origin.
Oh, I have no doubt whatsoever. None. Zero.
I concur with Jerry. Absolutely. I mean, I can see them. Of course, I know that they're of a supernatural, and like you said, there's a combination deal right now. There's so much other baloney going on with AI and all of those other things too. You've got getting crop dusted all the time with chemicals, with planes going over and things like that. There right now in the last 4 and 5 years, there's a mix of a whole bunch of things that are adding to it. But with that being said, it doesn't take away from the fact that a lot of it has been supernatural for decades and decades, and the other part is just kind of adding to it. You know what I'm saying? In the sense of the chaos and the balance. And as a matter of fact, some of the stuff that they're creating, these things are also feeding off of, which makes them stronger and able to do more physical acts. So, yeah.
And if you look at those patterns that the schizophrenics hear that I published on my website, and then you listen to the garbage coming over the TV, there's a one-to-one correlation. It's the same stuff. What's going on with our leaders right now, Biden and Harris and Trudeau and they're nuts.
Just fill in the blank.
They're certifiably crazy. You look at the symptoms of these patterns, they're following all of them. Except they've clawed their way to power and they're not willing to let it go.
Yeah.
I am curious, Lynn, about this generational mesmerism, we could maybe call it, that it seems that some of these energies are inhabiting families, so they can jump from person to person. Now, are they capable of spreading, meaning like calling other entities or other energies to a family?
Usually the chaos that is created how can I explain this? Usually the chaos that is created that they have the person create in their life is enough to keep them there, and other ones can attach from otherwhere. I mean, it doesn't always have to be family, from the family. I can't say that other word correctly. Yeah, familial, because I mean, some of these young kids, they hover in these parties and kind of wait to collect and attach too. So I'm not sure if that's one from their generation of family, because you figure with alcoholism or drug addiction, there's codependency, there's a whole range of dysfunction that goes along with it, sometimes abuse and things like that. So they tend to hover in herds in those sorts of situations. I don't know that there are like baby archons born, but they are archons that are on standby to attach. And a lot of times, like when my son would bring over some of his friends, and I knew that some of their friends were, smoking a little weed, doing a little, stuff. And I'd noticed that they would have on their backs these inverted, well, they weren't inverted. They looked like horse hooves in 4 areas located on their back, but not like the bottom of the hoof was facing outward, if that makes sense. So it had the area that was larger. Here's the back, and the area that was larger, like these anchors that were starting. And I told a couple of his friends, I said, look, if you don't want to have a permanent addiction and have something follow you for the rest of your life, you need to curtail what you're doing right now, because you're set up for it. And I know in your family, that sort of thing, goes on. But if you don't want to be that, this is your time to shift it. You have the choice right now to either have that invade your life or not. Well, some of them took heed and some of them didn't. So that's how that kind of gets set up as well. So, yeah, but
what I've seen with schizophrenics, the schizophrenic mother or father will create the conditions in family members, in the sons or daughters, or even the wife, for them to move in by the way he treats them.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
So I remember talking to one where his mother was psychotic, and he was doing everything he could to help her, but he finally had to move out because he started hearing the voices also.
Sure.
Wow.
Now, 2 things, I'm sure Lynn is aware of these things too, one is meth is a devil's drug. I mean, meth will open you up and they will just jump in there.
Yeah.
Okay. The second one is Ouija boards. Ouija boards are very, very dangerous. They're not toys. I've talked to prisoners who had been infested with voices that went from the Ouija board, that's the same one they were talking to on the Ouija board, to them hearing it in their heads.
Wow.
Ouija boards are not toys. They're very dangerous.
I totally agree. I pass them in Walmart. I want to take a torch and just torch them all, because they're not. They open portals and they allow things in that aren't supposed to be here. They do, and the thing is people think that it's a game, and once those things are in here, they don't leave. So, and they don't know how to close the portals. So it's not, and as a matter of fact, Mattel has actually even now made a pink Ouija board for girls for Barbie and a blue one for Ken back in
Oh,
2020, I believe it is, that they just released those for kids for like 8.
friggin'
Yeah, so
morons. Total
I mean,
morons.
you have to wait until you're 18 or 21 to buy beer. You have to wait until you're 16 to get a driver's license. You have to wait to a certain age to vote and do other things. But yet an 8-year-old can open up portals to other worldly things and allow them in to create havoc for people.
And pick their gender.
Those violent
Yes.
video games is
Oh,
another
yeah.
one. They are just so dangerous. They absorb the person and they become violent. You know, it's not like they don't have an effect. They have a very nasty effect. You know, they teach violence is a way to solve all your problems.
Well, it's also a way to desensitize someone and erode empathy.
Yes. Yeah, they do that too.
It must be an easy sort of situation for these things to thrive in a society like ours that, for the most part, is pretty spiritually bankrupt.
Yeah.
So we don't even realize, I don't really count myself in with this, but most people don't even realize that stuff like this is even on the menu, much less that you might be on their menu.
Exactly. You know,
Right.
and as mentioning too, people don't realize with these addictive behaviors that, you know, you got the guy that's in the peep show, and I don't mean to be vulgar, but in the peep show, and he thinks that he's having a private moment, but he doesn't realize how many dead souls he says standing there with him, watching the same thing with the same addiction, that he should probably be charging addiction for what he's doing in there. You know, I mean, they follow these things, and it's man, if they could see what I see, they wouldn't touch the stuff. I can tell you that, because some of it's pretty nasty. I've seen headless things. It's not good. I mean, even people that smoke cigarettes on their cigarette break, they're all huddled around, you know, trying to smell the smoke. And people argue with the fact that, well, they can't smell. And it's like, they do have all of their senses, whether they cross over or not. And at the time of death, they do have the choice of whether they want to cross over or not. They don't have to. And usually those are the ones that are lingering as the disembodied souls. But the thing about it is that it's not that they have an olfactory nerve smell. It's a memory recall. And if you've ever been to the ocean and you've smelled the salt spray or popcorn for that matter, if you are in a room with neither and you think about the smell of popcorn or the smell of the ocean, you can smell it. Exactly. However, on the other side, it's like on steroids. So they have that memory recall that still keeps them addicted to the fragrance of it, for that matter.
It definitely does feel like there is some design here. Like there are on the human plane, that there are some bad actors, some nefarious people that do understand these energies and are engaging with these energies to create addictions, to create schizophrenia, to create the conditions for these things. So when I think about that, I think, like, who is benefiting from people being experiencing these types of possessions?
The same people that, I'm sorry.
And it is the government, it is people in the media, it is people who are selling poisons or toxins. So I think there's a lot of people that are engaged and involved with perpetuating this terrain and creating this soil so that these things can have access.
Yeah, they don't make any money curing people. They make money treating people.
Exactly.
And they don't want them getting better, which is why, you know, they're totally ignoring the MACE energy method that they actually will get rid of psychological problems. They're not paying any attention to it at all. You know, the guy who invented it, they took it to the Australian legislature, showed them how well it worked, and said these should be in all your mental health centers. You should have MACE practitioners in all your state hospitals. They blew it off. They took it to the university, showed them how well it worked. The university said, you give us the patent to it, and we might do something with it. And they said, no thanks. You know, they don't want something out there that cures people. They want to keep treating people.
And I can vouch.
Endlessly.
I can vouch that it does work. Jerry offered to do it on me, and it's not like there's fireworks and bells and whistles. It's more subtle than that. But there was an incident in my life that was very, very traumatic. My father was abusive, and I go back to that situation, whereas before I was in it, my heart was racing, I was having anxiety. It was almost bringing me to tears. And after having the MACE energy method done on me by Jerry, it's more now like I'm looking through the window you don't forget the act is done, but you desensitize it, like it's looking through a window and saying, oh, look what's happening to those people. Isn't that terrible? But I'm not having that heart racing or that anxiety anymore. I'm separated from it. And that is how it works. And I'm telling you, Jerry's the man. It is excellent. I'm actually in the process of learning it myself. I've had to take a little bit of a hiatus and step back here because of the traveling things. And of course, there are things with banks and stuff going on right now. But I will be continuing next month to go ahead and go forward with that.
Oh, good for you. Glad to hear it.
So, Lynn, are you capable of doing your work with people via Zoom, or do you have to be kind of face to face or kind of in their auric field in order to?
It depends on what I'm up against. For instance, I don't do demons. Demons are above my pay grade. I can do demons. I don't like to do demons because of the compromised situation that it puts me in afterwards, that I suffer for weeks, because they know where to hit you in your weak spots. I don't care how much you protect yourself. However, I can help people online, but what I'm finding is that a lot of these people, because they've had these issues for so long, that they have created maladaptive coping skills in order to accommodate it. So when I actually help them with removing the entity, the attachments from them and help elevate their energy in that sense, they then need to go see Jerry and get the other part fixed. With the combination of that would be wonderful. But instead, they are more comfortable with what's familiar than going forward. And they kind of dip back down into that dimensional area where, the bottom feeders, where the bottom feeders are, they kind of dip back into that and they engage with the attachment again. So, and then other ones don't. They'll hit the floor running and they'll go for it and they'll be like, I'm good. So it depends on where they're at with their own journey in life. Some of them, they like the attention that they get, from even going and complaining about it to people. So, even though that's hard to imagine, that some of them want the help and some of them seem to want the help, but really don't. And because it's not just a quick fix thing that you can do. There's parts of it that they also have to participate in themselves. And a lot of them, it's like they'll call me back and they'll be like, well, that attachment's now standing at my door. Well, did you remember to do this? Did you do this? Well, I haven't done that yet. Well, did you get the iron bracelet? No, but I've got steel on and copper. No, it needs to be iron. They don't follow through and do specifically what they're supposed to do in order to maintain. So, and then, and like I said, I get the call back of, oh, it's back, or it's here, or it's standing at my door breathing. So I'm very, very careful as to who I do it for. Now, I'm also looking to maybe give some classes on how people can help themselves. So once they've had that information given to them to help themselves and they have accomplished that, then they can come to me and I can help them with the leftovers of that. But they need to make that initial attempt and, to show that they're earnest and that they really want to be free of some of the attachments that they have.
Yeah, they have to want to get rid of them. Now, MACE can be done online over Zoom. In an hour, major stuff can just be gone. And it's out of the person's universe. It's no longer there.
And do you do that online, Jerry?
Do I do that? Yeah, I work exclusively online. But, anybody listening out there right now, rather than go to a psychiatrist and get yourself drugged and poisoned with these toxins, please go to causisminstitute.com. It's www.causism, CAUSISM, institute.com. go there first. It'll tell you about it. There's a whole list of practitioners there you can engage with. And it's much less expensive than going to a psychiatrist and paying for these drugs that only dumb you down and just treat the symptom. This stuff gets at the cause and gets rid of the cause. The only thing I've seen in my entire 45 years of working in mental health that actually works.
I agree. Yeah, I totally agree on that.
So I had this experience that I've been kind of bandying about whether or not I was going to talk to you both about it, but I feel like this is the time to do it because I need just to share this with you, and maybe you guys would have some insight about what happened. And the beginning of the year, I have just graduated from university with my bachelor's degree in psychology. And I took a 32-year gap year between starting school in my teenage years and then
I did that
finishing
too.
as an adult. Yeah, but I finally finished. We have talked to lots of people who are in the psychedelic space, who work with psychedelics, who work with people who have mental health issues, PTSD, complex PTSD. And I have had my own struggles with mental health issues throughout my life, generational mental health issues that I share with my family. And in January, we had someone on the show who was talking about DMT and having DMT experiences. And so I was kind of in this critical, pivotal, burnout stage of school, like really kind of because of what you were talking about, Jerry, just dealing with people who don't want to really know about any spiritual aspect of psychology or psychiatry, really not interested in looking into any type of training. So I had a lot of issues with that because I was doing that type of research.
I did too.
So I decided to do DMT. I did it in a very unceremonious way, and it was a extremely frightening experience for me, terrifying. In fact, like if I think about it, like I can literally get chills because it scared the shit out of me. I didn't do it in a reverent way. I didn't do it in a reverent place, and I think that something piggybacked with me when I came out of that experience. It was a very quick experience. As soon as I went into this other dimension and everything changed visually, this was not this world. I was in another world. It was so terrifying that I kept saying over, I want to go back. I want to go back. I want to go back. Like I wanted to come back to this consensus reality. And so it was maybe 5 minutes that I was in that alternate space, and then I came back. After that experience, that was in January. It's now August. I've probably gained 60 pounds. I've had some serious mental health issues, depression, just really, really feeling stuck and not in a good spot. So I guess what my question is in sharing that with you is it possible that when we go into these other dimensions and these other spaces that we are bringing something back with us, even if it is only for a moment that we've been in that space?
Yeah, that's possible.
I agree.
It
is possible.
And if you're schizophrenic, you don't want to touch any of those. If you're mentally ill, you don't want to touch any of those kind of drugs. DMT, LSD, none of the hallucinogens, because it's going to be a bad trip.
Well, through my history, historically, as a teenager, I experimented with psilocybin, with cannabis, with LSD, with all types of psychedelics, and I never had a bad experience or an experience where I felt like something had come back. But in this experience, like it's almost like I got sucked into something.
You were baited.
Some cocoon. Yes, some cocoon or some, and I've been trying to figure out how the fuck to get out of this space. And the reason I'm asking you both this in earnest is because I know that this big psychedelic movement is happening right now, especially here in the United States with the legalization of psilocybin and this introduction of DMT and these other substances into psychiatry, and those being used as an adjunct to talk therapy. So I think that that's where some of my concern is that this happened to me in a very informal way, like in a very informal way. But I know people are doing this maybe in a clinical setting. And I think that there's probably some, I don't want to say danger in that, but I don't necessarily think that that's, if you don't know what you're doing, I don't think that that's a good thing necessarily to be introducing to.
No, I don't think so either.
Me either.
It could be very dangerous.
I agree. Absolutely. And sometimes too, we're baited. There are otherworldly things going on right now with some of the dimensional changes that are occurring where the third is coming in with the fifth. And these things are baiting so that they can keep you anchored in the third. And when you go into a meditative state or whatever it was that you were doing in order to go, you went down instead of up. Normally you would go upward where the things are not like that. But every once in a while, all of us have had our time where we've kind of gone a little bit lower than we've meant to. And it's kind of, and you have to fight to bring yourself back up. But right now, people that are going to make a difference in this world, like yourself, they know your future and they will bait you to go downward in order to start to have some of the problems to negate you from meeting your goal and to helping people for that matter. They'll
try to knock you out.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And it sounds like you were baited.
That's totally what it feels like. And so now I'm in this state where I graduated from school, and since May, I just feel like I am in a holding pattern. And it is just such a incapacitating feeling. And I feel like all of these other things that are on top of that with the state of politics and the state of the culture that we are in right now, I feel like there's a heightened sense for everything. Like everything is like vibrating at this frequency that's chaotic. And it feels like these things are at a buffet.
Well, they are.
Like Chris was saying, like they are just having a fucking field day with people.
But they're being exposed like never before.
Yeah.
They're being exposed on a massive scale right now.
And it is creating a lot of fear porn. And the thing is energetically, our thoughts matter and our speech matters, and what we put out comes back. And when you're thinking it and you're speaking it, it's like a double whammy. These things want people to engage with the fear porn because then their thoughts put more of that crap into the universe, and the chaos and the churning of the turmoil continues. And it's everywhere. I mean, I don't even watch the news anymore. I'm like, I'm done. I'm done. I'm fine. Hey, I know what heaven, what the other side looks like. I'm okay with death. However, I had a late life baby at 46 and she's 15. So I want to make sure that she's 18 first. But when she turns 18, if my turn comes, I have no problem with going. So, to me, if we're going to get blown up or something terrible is going to happen, I'm okay with that. I'm good to go. So, they have no control over me because I'm not afraid, but everybody else other than people like us with this, with our understanding, they're scared to death of death. So they're manipulated by all of this fear porn, and it makes it worse. And even like Jerry had said too, these video games and even some of the movies that people are watching and seeing, they're visualizing it. It's metabolizing in their brain and coming back out, even if it's not verbal. And again, it keeps that negativity churning in all of these areas and things. So it's so important to take control of the monkey mind, of everybody's monkey mind. And Jerry, he had mentioned too, even with people with schizophrenia, they've got to take control of mind and not listen to some of the things, and not allow, if you can avoid that input to be input. You turn your TV off, don't listen to the news. Maybe listen to the outcome, but you don't have to listen to all of the crap and the chaos and the twists and turns that are going on until it gets there. The end result, yes. Okay. You want to know who's going to be your president, and you want to know, if Bill Gates, well, they're already brewing something new, to scare everybody with, and to keep us in that herd mentality, so that we're not looking at what the left hand is doing because we're focused on the right. So,
Totally.
it just, you've got to take control and go into your heart, your centered heart thing, because they're finding that the heart has 5,000 times more memory than the brain does. And that's a fact.
And these things are consummate liars.
Yes.
They lie about everything. You can't believe anything they say. You can't trust anything they say. So if it's negative and coming into your head, just say, that's a lie. If you don't believe it, if you don't invest your energy in it, they can't get you. The other thing they hate is the 23rd Psalm. It's like burning them with a blowtorch. They can't stand it.
Yep.
And like Lynn said, there's something about iron. I've heard it for decades. They don't like iron. It's not steel. It's iron.
Because
so get a little piece of iron, an iron nail. Or do you have any idea why that is, Lynn?
Yes, I spoke to a demonologist, Nathaniel Gillis, and he's not like creepy. He's an amazing man. He's very humble. He believes in God.
We've had him on
I
our
love
show.
Nathaniel. Nate, he's like my little brother from another mother. I absolutely love him. But he told me about the iron bracelet because back in the day, and even still in some cases, they put the iron fencing around graveyards in order to keep the spirits inside. And you wear it on your left side because it's the receiving side of it. And it's for protection, especially when you are a person with these empathic gifts that we all have, or obviously we wouldn't be here. To wear that. And also the salt baths are important. If you can't take a salt bath, put some in your shoe. If you only have a shower, and it just has to be like 6 grains. It needs to be Himalayan salt or sea salt. Those are the best ones. Just 6 little grains in your shoe. If you're wearing sandals, put it in your pocket. If you're in a bathing suit, take one of those round Band-Aids and stick it on your butt underneath your bathing suit where nobody's going to see it, so that you have it on you, because the everything is energy, and the energy with the salt connects in with your auric field, and it creates this protective barrier. So like you're walking around in a salt bath all of the time. And if you keep your auric field whole without cracks in the windshield, the things will rebound off of you and they won't be able to attach, if that makes sense. So in the case of like, some people that are having mental illness and things like that. But, if you want to reach out to me, I can give you some things that you can do professionally, favor to you type thing. And definitely the mace energy thing with Jerry would be wonderful. But there are certain things with smudging that they don't realize they start at the left of the door, and to use dragon's blood in the case of something more malevolent than sage, because the sage just tickles it and pisses it off. And then you've got a whole nother dimension with otherworldly things, with even the elementals and fays, of which I wasn't my forte, but I've been thrown into that recently. And I actually have pictures of them. So I do. I have pictures of night fae. I have pictures of bogarts and things like that are on a property that I own that I consider it enchanted. That's a whole nother show. But anyway, we're dealing on many levels with many, many otherworldly things. And, the schizophrenia are the ones that they hit the hardest and the worst. And that's why I'm so thrilled that Jerry has been such a trailblazer on this. And I'm so in awe of him, and I'm honored to have, met him, to even be included in a part of this. And he has validated me so much. And I really, really appreciate it. So thank you, Jerry.
You're more than welcome.
Well, it's amazing that you mentioned the visual aspect of this, because if you look at Hollywood loves horror films. loves the serial killers, loves these very, very dark, negative tropes. And I think one of the reasons that I'm not really attracted to those types of movies is that there's that saying, the body keeps track. Like the body is taking notes of everything that you're putting inside of it, whether that be food or visual image. And I think that energy that we're talking about when we're talking about this loosh is this very low frequency energy. So these things are looking for the lowest frequency energy, that gotcha moment where you do the jump scare. That's like basically giving them a little blast.
That's their chocolate.
Of energy.
That's their candy. Yep. They love that.
And they will trigger that if they can.
That's their purpose. Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. And it can really mess you up. I mean, and people too that go around that have spirits in their houses and they think that they're innocent. And maybe it's the little old lady that died in the house, but still you shouldn't have them in there because they disturb your sleep. They make you feel tired. They give you brain fog, and then all of the snowball effect of what happens medically if you don't get good sleep. And if you, that sort of thing. So, it's not good to have spirits in your house, period. Anyway, you need to have that be clear. I'm not sure how long we're going today. I just want to say this. I have a show to be on at 8:00. So I have to be in the green room at about 10 minutes to 8. But please reach out to me. You can get my information from Jerry and I'll be happy to, and again, mine complements what his does. His is always first, really, to have that inner work done. And then I just kind of take care of the outer and I can do some finish up that way if there's anything stuck on the outside, but the internal stuff is fixed. But usually once the internal stuff is fixed, he elevates your energy. It elevates automatically. And I wanted to say something too about the heart having 5,000 times more memory. You're right. It's not the brain that's recording it. It's the heart that's recording it. And people, if they would use their heart more, there was a situation with a little girl that needed a heart transplant. She was 11 years old. There was another little girl that was brutally murdered, and her parents allowed the heart to be donated to this recipient, this other little girl. The little girl, after 2 years, the first 6 months, she started having night terrors. And then at the end of the 2 years, she was able to identify the murderer of the little girl that killed the little girl, and because they didn't know who did it. And you can look this up. This is a fact. And they talk about, how people, when they have transplants of other people's body parts and stuff, sometimes they don't like a certain food anymore. They start talking with an accent, or they love something that they never wanted to eat before, and those sorts of things. But the heart is the core. And, even with that, if you feel heavy or depressed or something like that, if you center yourself into your heart and you open it and radiate out mentally, because of course we get monkey mind, so you can verbally say it to keep yourself on track, and you envision pink energy coming into your field saying love, 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 love. That is repellent also to some of those things that are not necessarily attached, like the schizophrenic, but it can work with some of the outer things that are cheering them on, their fan club, because they all get a little thrill out of it. It can make them exit the room. They can't stand it. It's like repellent. So maybe even sitting and trying that radiating of that pink light from your heart, and you envision it just coming out, love, 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 love. And if you have to say it, that's fine, because again, they will shrivel like raisins. They won't have it'll disable them from having the ability to do physical acts, whereas the opposite, the negative, empowers them. And if it is a guide or a loved one that is come to visit you and you see something and you're questioning, is it really mom or is it not? If it's really mom, they relish in that. If they have crossed over and they're coming back for a visit, and they relish in the joy and the love. Whereas the other things that might be mimicking mom or showing up as a child, they they can't stand it and they exit quickly. So that's how you know, in this day and age where they're trying to bait people like yourself, they try to bait you to keep you anchored in the third. This is a way to determine whether you are talking to someone that you really think you are versus someone that's mimicking that person, because there's an invitation factor that goes with it, like the black-eyed children, where you have to invite them in for them to be able to stay. So if they present as your mother or as a child or, you know, something like that, you'd be more apt to be like, oh, it's just mom, or, oh, it's just a little girl, and you would let them stay. And they really need to not do that. So when in doubt, radiate love into the room and definitely see if it makes a difference.
Yeah, they can't stand it.
In the house, do you recommend this in the house, like in the room where this happened? Does it matter where
You know
I
what?
do it?
It works everywhere. If you're at work and there's a particular person that rubs you the wrong way, if you take a minute to sit just quietly and radiate that love energy at them, it can even negate a fight between a husband and a wife. It diffuses things. You know, when that energy shoves out that negative energy, it diffuses. So, and, you know, you'll start to notice the change in people, especially if you do it multiple times. You know, like you'll sit there and maybe in the morning and then at lunchtime, hit them again. And then before you leave, hit them again. And all of a sudden the next day they come in and, hey, I emptied your trash for you. And I did this for you. And you're like, wow, isn't that wonderful? She's so sweet. She was such a biatch yesterday. You know what I'm saying? It really, no, I'm serious. You know, try it. You'll see. You'll see it totally, that energy, because everything is energy. Like Jerry and I have been trying to say in the medical fields, they overlook this so much, but that energy, it interplays and love conquers all. I even use it when I go in and clear houses of malevolent spirits, and it works like a charm. So it's easy too.
And I can tell you that the psychotic voices can't stand it. They cannot stand being sent love.
So you've got about we've got about 15 more minutes to go. You've got to leave in about 5-ish minutes.
Yes, I do.
Right, Lynn? Okay. Before you go, I want to make sure that you tell the people that are listening and watching where they can find you and your work.
Okay. I just recently did a show on Beyond Belief for Gaia with George Norrie that was released about 2 months ago. I'm very, very proud of that.
Cool.
I am with Cisco on Journey Through the Gate every Sunday night right now for a series, and then it'll be the last Sunday of every month. I'm going to be doing 2 Tuesdays a month with Aquarius Rising Africa on Tuesdays. Also, I'm doing various events. I'm doing one in Georgia actually 2 in Georgia and 2 in Virginia coming up here in the next coming months. I do have a website, www.lynnmonet.com. I can be reached there. There's an area that you can email me if you need. I have multiple books out. They're on my website. I've got Omnipresent, which is going to end up being a 5-book series. Colors of Heaven, which is about death and dying. It's very beautiful. Hopefully to take the stigma of death and dying away. And The Gap, which is a whole nother thing for teenagers and stuff like that about making good choices in life. You can purchase my things through Amazon if you wish. However, if you buy them from me, I will personalize them for you. And they're a little cheaper. And so, you know,
and Soros doesn't get any money.
Yeah. But, you know, and I'll be happy, you know, to do that for you because they really do come directly from me. So, you know, reach out to me that way or look me up on YouTube. I'm kind of all over the place. So, yeah. Thank you for having me. Jerry, thank you for inviting me as well and having, you know, creating the opportunity for this to happen. So, and it's a pleasure. And definitely, Hunter and Chris, reach out to me if you need, and I will gladly walk you through some things that might be helpful. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and exit if that's okay. Thank you.
Okay. Of course.
Thank you. Many blessings.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
I'm sending you love and light from my heart.
To meet
Absolutely.
You.
Thank you so much.
I'll take it.
Yeah, I've got you, girl. I've got you. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
so much.
Bye.
Take care, Lynn.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good to meet
you.
Okay.
Do you guys have any final questions you want to ask that I could answer for you maybe or no?
Do you have something? I have something I would like to say, but it can be at the very last thing. If you have something that.
I am just curious about where you're at right now in your career. Are you still seeing patients? Are you still working uh, within the confines of like a state institution,
No.
or do you just do one-on-ones?
Yeah, I'm just doing one-on-ones. I see 2 people a day. That's all I want to see. That's enough.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
It can be
sure.
done over Zoom.
Mhm.
Okay.
So I'm seeing people all over the planet, all over the Western world, really.
Fantastic.
It all can be done over Zoom, and it works just as well over Zoom as it does face to face.
Fantastic.
Would you say the number one mode of defense before anybody seeks out any kind of therapy or MACE, what you're talking about, or even seeking you out, would be to cultivate a calm state of mind?
Well, that's a good way to start.
Mhm.
Basically, what MACE does is takes care of trauma, because most psychological problems result from trauma. And you can't live on this planet without becoming traumatized at some point. It's just impossible.
Mhm.
So what happens in a trauma is that you have that horrible feeling that just won't go away. So the ego comes and says, okay, I'll take care of this. And it takes it and it buries it in the subconscious and then locks it down. So it can't get out and it's buried alive. So the result of that is it affects your thinking, your self-perception, the way you interact with others, your feelings, what you say, what you don't say. I mean, it affects everything. And the way it kind of does, so if you had somebody in particular who traumatized you, anytime somebody shows up in your psychic sphere who reminds you of that person, this thing is going to go nuts. But it's confined in there. So it's going to say, well, I can't get out. It's not my fault. That guy's making you feel that way. And it's going to project all that garbage onto whoever's out there and tell you to either attack them or run from them or avoid them. In either case, it's going to cause a disturbance, which these negative entities feed on. And that's energy. It's negative energy. It's stuck in there. It interferes with your spirit's energetic flow. So it's like a rock in a stream. It's just interfering with the flow. Mace can go in there and pull that out, and it's really not Mace doing it. Mace makes the connection. It's your spirit that's doing it. So Mace works with the spirit to not only locate where that trauma is, but also the spirit will take it, and if you connect it up with that negative energy flows into positive. So negative flows into positive. Okay, the spirit will absorb it and turn it into positive energy. So the person will feel like they have more energy and they will feel lighter. And like Lynn was saying with her trauma that we worked on, you still remember it. You can still, oh yeah, it happened in this room, but there's no energetic charge to it. It's gone. So as far as that's concerned, it doesn't bother you anymore. There's no reactions to people who were similar that caused that thing. It's out of your universe. It's gone. And all that can happen in an hour or less. It's not like this concept. And what's interesting about it is the therapist does not have to know what that trauma was. They don't have to know at all. It works anyway, as long as the person can remember it and go back and relive it for a short period of time. So it's an energetic therapy. It's not like a psychotherapy. There's not a lot of talking. It's follow the instructions and the cues that we get from the person, and you can the person can actually feel that energy leaving. They can actually visually see it leaving. It's being reabsorbed, but it's not the Mace method that does the healing. It's the person's spirit, the energetic being that does the curing of it. All Mace does is makes the connection.
It's so interesting because when you're talking about this parasitic element of these entities or these energies, especially when dealing with patients who have schizophrenia, it seems like where they are attaching themselves is around the adrenal glands. And that would cause a lot of exhaustion. If your adrenal glands are being drained of energy psychically, then you're going to feel exhausted after one of these experiences.
Well, like Lynn said, and a number of the people have told me, they attach at the back of your neck. Right at the base of their spine is where they usually attach. And now how they drain that energy, I have no idea. I don't know. I've had patients tell me I can feel my energy leaving when they're there. I can feel myself being drained. How they do that, I have no idea. I haven't the foggiest idea how they suck the energy out of people.
It just seems like it would be the organs, like using the organs as the device.
I don't know.
Like alcohol attacks the liver and makes the liver very hot. So it seems like that energy or that entity, that archon would be somehow associated with that meridian.
Well, there's a specific entity that's attached with alcohol. I mean, it's different from meth or any of the other drugs. It's a very specific type of entity that is attracted to alcohol. And a lot of these are, dead alcoholics. They can't get drunk in the spiritual world, so they have to jump into somebody who's drunk enough that is not blocking them. And I've heard several stories of where they just jump in, usually in bars when the guy's drunk, and they just take over. They take over the drinking. So it's not just the alcoholic who's drinking; it's all these spirits who've entered them also.
I've lived with an alcoholic, like a blackout drunk. And
so you saw him change when he was drunk, right?
100%. I can tell you.
It's no longer the same guy that wasn't drunk.
It was a possession. It was an absolute possession. It's like the life leaves the eyes and that person is not there anymore, right. But there is some energy that's coming through there.
And it's not a good energy.
No, it's terrifying. And the meth thing that I find so interesting is that is really something you can see physically on the face.
Yeah.
Like that, you can see someone who's on meth and they all seem to have kind of the same expression on their faces.
Yeah, meth is a very, very dangerous drug. It lets the dark side in like no other drug I've ever seen. I mean, it's like open you up and come on in. The prisoners called it the devil's drug.
And so interesting that it's one molecule away from Adderall.
Well, they're both speed.
So basically, if you're going to a doctor and you're getting Adderall, he's or she is legally giving you speed. That's what they're doing.
Yeah, but it's usually in fairly small doses. And now I've talked to a number of prisoners who, went and got Ritalin and Adderall, and they were feeling good. They were able to concentrate. They were able to concentrate and do well in school, but they kept pushing it. They kept increasing it. So it's like, okay, if this makes me feel good, maybe more will make me feel better. And I'd ask them, well, why did you do that? And they went, well, I don't know. But there were a number of prisoners who ended up in prison who had started on Adderall or Ritalin and just kept increasing it.
Wow.
Holy shit. So I know you don't have a crystal ball, but I want to try on some level, if we can, to elevate this conversation and leave with some sense of hope. Do you think because people like you and people like Lynn are being more vocal and talking about this stuff, do you see any type of a sea change with this predatory energy? Do you think it's going to get better before it gets worse?
It looks like it's going to get worse before it gets better when you look at the politics and the wars going on around and the number of people being just killed. I mean, you talk about trauma. 600,000 Ukrainians killed in that war, and how many, probably double that have been maimed or traumatized with PTSD. And they don't have anything to treat it. I talked to one guy from the VA and tried to tell him about this. He didn't want to listen to it. He listened to Reiki and that kind of stuff. He didn't want to hear about this.
Yeah. Because it comes off woo-woo. People think like, oh, they spiritual entities, possessions, that's scarlet letter days.
Mace works with negative identities. It doesn't work with spirits, but it will take the food that those negative entities feed off of, and it will throw it out. So they can no longer trigger that. So the person's going to be calmer, and those things are going to be weaker because they don't have as much food to feed off of. And gotcha. There's kind of like a blending kind of thing where sometimes I'm not sure if it's a negative identity or a negative entity. And there are times where I thought it was a negative identity, and it turned out to be a negative entity. And it went.
How do you clear your energy? How do you do this where you don't feel like these things are attaching themselves to you?
Yeah.
Well, I have the iron thing, like Lynn says. I have a medicine bag. I have crystals. I pray a lot. Every morning before I do an interview, I turn it over so speak through me. And I think I have some powerful guardian angels watching over me. I remember one time in the emergency room, I was talking to a psychotic gal, and we were talking about her symptoms, and then all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, she goes, "You're never going to get hurt dealing with this. You're never going to get hurt." And I'm like, "Well, where'd that come from?" That's not, we weren't talking about that. She goes, "I see this giant angel behind you watching over you." And I went, thank God. Thank God I got something watching over me. And I never have actually been hurt by a psychotic patient. Came close, but never have. Where some of my colleagues have been hurt pretty bad. One guy ended up in the hospital.
So you are being given some reinforcement or some backup that helps you in this space. And I just applaud you because I know how difficult the work is. And it's amazing that you're doing this.
Well, just trying to wake them up. And you wouldn't believe how many emails I get from people that are just writing in to thank me for getting this information out. I had one guy who was schizophrenic. He said, "Now that I know they're not me, I can handle this."
Yeah, that's great.
Because there's so much shame attached to having any type of mental health issues, admitting something like that, ending up in a hospital, like any of it. I can see how it can be life-ruining for someone to admit that they're having struggles.
Yeah, and the voices don't want them to tell anybody anything. So there's really not a lot of positive benefit to these people with regard to talking about the voices, because their friends leave, their parents get all upset, they get drugged into a psychiatrist's office, they get drugged, they end up locked up in a mental hospital with all these other crazy people. And the voices themselves are saying, "Don't tell them, because this is what's going to happen to you." And unfortunately, that's what does happen to most of them. They end up getting drugged senseless, and they hate it. Those antipsychotic drugs are not abusable drugs. And you can go across the border to Mexico and buy them over the counter. That's how it should be. But no, these money-grubbing psychiatrists, it's like, "Oh, no, we're the only ones who can prescribe them. We want you to come to our office every month and pay us $200, and we'll give you another prescription for these." And then you have to go to the drugstore and pay 5 times what you pay in Mexico for virtually the same drug. So you can go across the border in Mexico right now, and you can get Risperidol that'll cost maybe $800 a month to keep you sane here. You can get it for $75 over the counter. There's no reason for them to make that a prescribed drug. It's not addictive. Nobody likes it. Everybody who takes it hates it. Not even the psychotics will stay on it. They all eventually go off it. It's not an abusable drug. But these money-grubbing scumbags are like, "Oh, yeah, we want to keep it under our control." They don't want even regular medical doctors prescribing it. They want it all under their purview.
Well, it's the insurance mafia working with the pharmaceutical mafia, working with the medical mafia.
Working with the Congress who are passing laws to benefit them. not the people, to benefit them.
Yeah. Yeah. They're all lining each other's pockets.
Yes.
Well, what an honor again to talk to you, Jerry. Thank you
Yes.
so much.
Thank you.
I'm so glad that we were able to reschedule this a couple of times.
Yeah.
Because
It took a little bit of doing, didn't it?
it did, but Chris and I were really desperate to have you both on, and so we just thank you for being so flexible.
Yes, it's much appreciated.
Well, I know another gal who's willing to talk about. Now, did I ever bring an on with you guys, or I never did that?
No.
No. Okay, I'll have to make a note of that.
Yeah.
Because I have other people who are willing to speak about their experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'd love that. Well,
Okay.
before we go, can you tell the folks listening or watching where they can find you and your work?
Well, they can find me on my website at jerrymarzinsky.com. And Sherry and I have also written this book about how we came to the conclusion that these voices are not hallucinations, and how they operate and what they actually are. So we'll take you on a tour through the psychotic mind. Anybody who has a schizophrenic son or daughter needs to know this stuff, because they're not going to get better as long as they think these things are hallucinations.
Mm-hmm.
And those drugs are not going to cure them. They don't cure anything.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Can they get that book? Is there a link on your website to get that? Or should
they can get it from my website at jerrymarzinsky.com. They can get it on Amazon. And again, if you're thinking about going to a psychiatrist, try Causism first. www.causisminstitute.com. There's a number of therapists. Mm-hmm. They work with people all over the planet, and they can see you over Zoom.
Cool. We'll have that link on the episode notes too. All right, Jerry, thank you so much. It's been an honor, and it won't be the last time. I will ask you if you could leave your browser window open to make sure that the audio and the video is all uploaded.
Okay.
That's how this platform works. Shouldn't take but a few minutes.
Okay.
And I will let you know when this comes out.
Okay. Yeah, send me a link when you have one. I'll just leave this open.
What'd you think?
I did not want to go on profile. I was afraid if I went on profile that Lynn would see some creepy crawly thing on me, and I didn't want to have her see that. So I was very aware, cognizant of my physical body and how I was moving.
Mm-hmm.
But I do feel like she could help me.
That, in case the pre-first hour folks don't know what she's talking about, that is in the second hour. Yes, when Hunter asks Lynn about an experience that she had.
Yeah, and I don't remember in the first hour. In the second hour, if she said, I think it was in the first hour where she said she can see them when someone turns on a profile, that they're like raised up on the body, and she can see them. But then she said at one point that the thing's head is smaller than the human head, and that it would like peer behind. Yeah. And then I got all freaked out, and I was thinking, is there fucking something? Because she's looking at me, and is she seeing some shit? And so, of course, I got in that looping thought, which reinforced the idea that there was probably something there that she was saying.
Well, I mean, would it, to go into something that the free folks aren't going to really understand what we're talking about, but still needs to be commented on, would that be a relief to find out that something like that was going on, because you would have something tangible to focus on, or would that not have that effect?
I think when you go to a doctor, psychiatrist, psychologist, I'm obviously giving giving you some insight of my own psyche.
Full disclosure.
Exactly. I think that we're always managing perceptions. And so when you go into a psychiatrist's office or a psychologist's office, you're managing perceptions. You're telling this person your viewpoint. They're not getting the spectrum of everyone's viewpoint in your life. So you may downplay your bad behavior to make yourself look better, because no one wants to look fucked up. No one wants to look sick. And so I think the idea is that I'm trying to manage perceptions. And if there's something wrong with me or I'm dealing with something, it takes a lot of vulnerability to admit that. And so it took a lot for me to say, I feel like something's going on with me. I feel stuck. I need help. But that kind of courage, I think, is what you need in order to heal yourself. So if there is some energetic entity on me, that thing did not want me to tell my truth. And so the fact that I was able to do that, what that's saying is, I'm not giving you any more power. I'm acknowledging that you're there, and I'm taking my power back. And that means being vulnerable and admitting that I feel off kilter.
I think if you're going to take the time and effort to interact with somebody that you're hoping will heal you or help you in your healing, it's of utmost importance to be just dead, painfully honest with them. That's the way that I feel, at least, because I don't want to withhold something from this person that may be the key to it, or a very big part, because I'm embarrassed by it, or because it doesn't paint me in a flattering light or something like that. That may be what the whole thing centers around.
Yeah.
So I think it's of utmost importance to do that. Yeah, you know that.
But I think that's what prevents people from healing, is because we're trying to manage perceptions, and no one wants to. It's like falling down and you scrape your knee and you hop up and go, I'm fine, everything's fine, when you may not be fine. But it's a way of insulating yourself, or it's a survival skill of protecting yourself so that people don't know what your vulnerabilities are. And, I know this from my own experience. I know this from other people who've gone to see a therapist, that some people aren't always honest because they don't want to seem fucked up. So they're going to make themselves look as good as they possibly can because they're trying to manage that perception.
Exactly.
And I think what I've gotten over in the course of doing this podcast with you is I've gotten over the vanity of needing to look perfect or present myself as a perfect person, because I'm not. And so I'm being vulnerable by sharing things that are intimate or private with me. And I think that what Jerry and Lynn are doing is they're going into these spaces with people who have been abused by the system, who are very fearful of being honest and open, and they're able to crack open something to create some bond, some trust bond, that the healing is actually able to happen. So I think you're right. If I'm really in earnest interested in changing anything psychically or spiritually that I feel like is going on with me, I've got to get really clear about that. And in order to do that, I've got to be able to be vulnerable.
Anybody who's going to go into that space has to be totally upfront. I tend to be, and I haven't really gone into situations like this very often because fortunately I haven't had a whole lot of huge things that have impacted me that way. But when I do go into those spaces, I tend to overshare. I tend to give so much. So like, this may not have anything to do with what's going on with me, but I'm going to tell you anyway, because it may, and everything is connected. So even though it may not seem on the outset that these two things are connected, perhaps on some other level they are. And just in case, I want you to know. But I think that's the tricky thing about talk therapy, for instance, is that, the trick is in the terminology there. Like, your therapist only knows what you tell them. So
Exactly.
If you're not telling them everything, or you're censoring what you're saying, or dressing it up to look better than it is, you're not going to get anywhere. You're wasting your time first and foremost, and you're wasting your therapist's time. So honesty, blatant honesty, tough fucking honesty that's not going to necessarily paint you in a good light, I think is is a place that you need to get to, not you in particular, but one needs to get to before they engage with somebody who is going to need all the information that they can in order to help you out or to try and help you help yourself.
I think it's all goes down to what your intention is. And some people don't want help when they go to see a therapist. It's trendy to have a shrink. So they just want to say they've got a shrink and they don't really want to change. And that's okay. That's that person's business. It's not my business. What I was really, really fascinated by and interested in was the moments where Lynn and Jerry were talking about these different archons associated with different drugs or different inebriants, and how those energies come along with a whole slew of people who have passed on, who have been addicted to those things. And having lived with more than one alcoholic in my life and people who are addicted to specific drugs, I can, from my own observations, I can say that there is definitely something to that. I worked in a bar. I was a bartender. I saw people switching or flipping the light switch off in their eyes from the moment they walked in the bar to the moment they left, and when that pivot or that switch happens. So there's definitely a there with what they're talking about. But how fucking curious is that imagine being in a bar and having clairvoyance and being able to see all these dead alcoholics and how you would want to like shake people and say, don't drink that. Like there's someone there that's making you do that. So I see what a powerful thing those things are. When she made that comment, the hair stood up on the back of my neck when she was talking about these things preventing you going from 3G, 3D to 5G. 3G to 5G, just changing your EMF frequency. Yes. No, but when she was talking about that, someone that I follow on Telegram, I think his name is Drew. He has been talking about this a lot recently, that we are going into there's this ascension that's happening right now, and that these energies are ramping up because they are trying to hold people. They are trying to keep people in this 3D level. So when she said that, I was like, I think that's what's happened. And it is so amazing to have someone say, these things know your path, or they can see your path, and they're going to try to fuck with you or take you off of that path. When I hear that, I'm like, yes, that totally makes sense. Yes. So I'm going to reach out to Lynn. I'm going to reach out to Jerry. I'm going to try these few things that Chris took notes on when she was talking, and I will report back what the results are of that. But I like the sovereignty of being able to heal myself and know that there's very specific things that I can do to do that. And so I'm excited about that prospect.
Yeah, it's interesting what they said about the alcoholics, the dead alcoholics. Mm-hmm. Pardon me. Too, it made me think about a guest that was on a long, long time ago, and I'm thinking it was somebody that was on even before you came on the Melt, that was talking about contact with spirits, and this wasn't in any sort of malevolent way necessarily. I don't remember it being in a malevolent context, but they would try and talk this person into walking through, say, a grocery store and pick up a package and read the ingredients, and the spirits would just sort of lap the words up, like there was something, like, speaking of addictions, they weren't done with their bodies. They're addicted to physicality, which is very interesting and makes, I could understand making sense. And that goes back to things that I've heard when I was studying Tibetan Buddhism about attachments, not attachments like spiritual attachments, but being attached to something.
To something.
Yeah. And in this case, it would be being attached, and they mention that on many different levels, being attached to the physical world. Like,
Duncan Hines cake.
Yeah, for instance, like, don't get too enthused with something, because that could be the thing that keeps you incarnating into the physical world. Like, you want to, it doesn't mean don't enjoy them, but put them in their place. Have perspective when you enjoy these things, because this is only a thing that you're going to be able to enjoy while you're driving this body around. So it's interesting that happens with drugs too, which makes total sense. Alcoholism, especially if you die of it, I would imagine it's a pretty intense addiction. I was really heavily drinking for a period of my life, but I don't think that I was ever an alcoholic. I think I was more psychologically addicted to that. I couldn't imagine being physically addicted to that. And that's a totally different level. So it was interesting, them saying that and bringing that up. I never thought about drugs being a way that maybe some disembodied spirit would try to inhabit a person in order to experience those things. Very fascinating.
Totally makes sense.
Yeah.
I was thinking about our son who recently had a birthday. He had a sleepover, and it was a night of Grand Theft Auto and a week of cake and ice cream and parties and friends and lots of stuff. And then after that week, he got sick. And I was thinking about the video game element of what Jerry and Lynn were talking about. And I was thinking, like, he was purging because he had stayed up all night and played video games, and he'd eaten all this sugar and all this overstimulation. And so the body went into like purge mode after that. And I think it's so important to see how, if you're going to engage in these things, great, but also understand the implications of engaging with those things, and make sure that you are doing certain things to shed and to remove any attachments or any negative energies around that. But I think that so much of what's happening right now that's putting us in these states is just unconscious living.
Mm-hmm.
It's not being present. It's not being in the moment. And all the devices that we have in our life that take us out of the moment, again, are creating this loosh. It's creating this energy that these parasitic entities are feeding off. So do you want to be a barnacle on a whale? Do you want something to be a barnacle on you? Like, do you want, like what are you feeding? And do you want to keep feeding that thing?
That being said, I don't think that that works the same way for everybody. There are people who can drink socially. They can go out and have a couple of beers once a month, and they're fine with that. And I think that I've seen people play video games and they get emotionally wrapped up into it. Their eyes are just sort of vacant, and they get like pissed off if they lose, or they're like, God damn it, and they're screaming and they're getting all wrapped up in it. Fortunately, I don't see the kids as being those kids. So I think they've got a little more of a handle on that. I'm not saying that they're completely immune from those things, but as opposed to the kid who's getting, like, they're all encompassed, like they play video games for fucking hours.
Yeah.
They get emotionally wrapped up into it. When they're not playing, they think about video games. Like, so I think it's important to recognize our part in that, our agency in that, and how willing we are or aren't to give ourselves to things, substances, situations, activities.
Yeah.
How consciously we engage in all of that, and what we're exchanging with it, and how much of ourselves we're utilizing when we engage in that stuff.
Yeah, but and as Lynn was saying, teenage parties are replete with entities and energies, because that energy is very accessible, and it's new, and it's probably very tasty. And so, and there's a lot of self-concern at that age, and a lot of judgment of yourself and of others at that age. And so I think what is important to understand is that you can bring someone into your space who has energy parasites or something, that then that thing gets lodged in your space. So I think what's great about our kids is that they're not consistently in that loop. So our son can loop on a weekend one night, and he and his friend can stay up all night, but that's not their normal routine. That's not what he's normally doing.
Exactly.
So what I would say is, what our duty and responsibility is to help him to clean his energy after that thing happens. I just found it interesting that there was a purging, that he got sick.
Yeah.
Because I just think he was overstimulated. There was a lot of energy, a lot of activity, and I think his body was just like, okay, now it's time to power down for a moment and recalibrate.
Yeah, rebalance.
Yeah.
And then last week, and since it's his last weekend and he was at his mother's, she said, you're not gonna have a bedtime. You can stay up and play video games, whatever. And he stayed up and played Minecraft all night long, which is like one of the most unviolent games. And if there is any sort of constructive or creative part of a game, it's Minecraft. So I think that's fairly, what's the word I'm looking for? Innocuous. So it's not like, I don't feel like he's necessarily drawn to those types of games. Typically, he just likes playing games. So anyway, I just wanted to add that in. But
yeah, I think we have been very aware and cognizant of the emotional terrain and the physical terrain and the psychic terrain that we are creating here in our home. And I'm certainly not going to defend any behavior, because I don't think I should or I need to. But I think people can relate to these types of challenges that you face when you're dealing with teenagers, or you're dealing with living with anyone. So I think it's a very important thing that I want to really focus on, is not the negativity. Like, what can we do to help our family, our little microcosm of our community? How can we elevate our energy? How can we be firing on all pistons? So that's really my focus. I am always interested in talking to people who are talking about energy stuff like this, because I think that it is very powerful and that we need to be vigilant.
I agree. So thank you, Jerry and Lynn, for coming on.
Yes.
And thank
awesome.
all of you for listening and giving your valuable attention to this conversation. And hopefully you feel like it left you something. It gave you something constructive to chew on and grapple with. And maybe you saw some of yourself in some of the things that were brought up. So yes, if you would like to contact us, guest recommendations, whatever, just to say howdy, you can reach us at the Melt Podcast at protonmail.com.
And always hunter-muse at protonmail.com.
And thank you, those of you who choose to support the show financially. There's lots of ways to do that. That is also obviously a very tangible one. My goal is still to be able to devote more of my time to this podcast, but what it's giving me financially right now doesn't really give me the luxury to do that so much and maintain my sanity. So, I mean, I love doing it. I love having the opportunity to have conversations with these people and have my lovely wife engage in these exchanges too, and add all of the wonderful insights that she has and her wisdom and experience to them. So I would like to do it more. So that's one way to contribute. Sharing this to friends and family, whether it be our YouTube channel or a specific episode, all of it helps. Reviewing, rating, it all helps. So with that in mind, we would love to have you weigh in. So
yeah, and we love your comments. We don't always. Our Discord is a dumpster fire right now. We don't really go on there. We don't really talk very much. We do have people who have been great about giving us book recommendations and guest recommendations, and some of that stuff has been ported over to Patreon, which is really great too. We love the YouTube comments. But if you can't do any of that, I understand.
Yeah.
I get stuck too in my life, and I get in this place where I just can barely put one foot in front of the other. But maybe think a good thought for us. Just keep us in your prayers and your thoughts, because we really do love you. And I know that sounds strange because we don't know most of you, but we do love you and we care, and that's why we keep doing this. Chris works his ass off. He works really, really hard. He has a very physical job. And then on the side, he does all of the production for the melt. I've gotten a little bit better about doing research for our guests, but he really is the infrastructure to this show. And so it takes a lot for him to maintain his sanity because there's so much shit going on in our life right now. But we love you and we appreciate you, and we are so blessed to have this platform and to share these conversations with you. And so thank you for being here and listening to us babble. And we are happy.
And that being said, there are people who piss and moan because we have a second hour that is behind a paywall. I would recommend that they start their own podcast and see where that leads them. And there are people who can't contribute to get behind the paywall because they aren't financially lucrative enough to be able to afford the $5 that it takes to do that monthly. If that is the case, feel free to reach out to either of those email addresses, and we will get you in to behind the wall because that information is important, and I don't want money to be the reason why you can't get behind there. So
and it's easy to get pissed off and think that we're getting rich.
Oh my God,
but
we're not.
We're so not, and we're not doing this to get rich. We're really doing this for the love of conversation and the love of rhetoric, and we just really love talking to people. But that being said, again, if you are not in a place financially that you can afford $5, I'm okay with that. I totally understand what that's like to be just where you just don't have it. And especially in this time period, we live in a time period where people are struggling. And so this information is valuable to us, but it is also valuable to you. And that's why we want to share it. So please, it's okay to say, I'm struggling, I need help, and we will answer your call.
Yes. And we'll even send you a few stickers.
Or a book.
Or a book, yeah.
And some good thoughts and loving energy. We'll send it all.
Yes.
All right.
All. Thank you so much. Much love, and until next time.